Okay, so I'm going to address some false assertions that a lot of people have been peddling on the internet for a while now about being African, black, and being a Christian. There's a lot of anti Christian sentiment on the internet, and the pro black or the Pan African community is no exception. You have probably seen many prominent figures like PLO Lumumba, etc., peddling these false narratives. So I'm going to address these in two parts in this video. Part 1. There is this idea that Christianity itself is a white man's religion created by the Roman Empire. If you've ever come across these arguments, you will also hear something along the line that Christianity was used as a form of control. Basically, the argument is that black slaves were more susceptible to being subservient due to their indoctrination with Christian beliefs, forgetting that black slaves in Americas and the Caribbeans were not the first people on earth to be made into slaves. Slavery, in essence, is forced labor, so therefore one would certainly not require some form of manipulation besides the use of weapons or other objects of destruction. What is actually interesting is that these very same people that are so quick to mention that Christianity was a form of control for black slaves will also tell you of the many rebellions and various efforts put up by the slaves for their own freedom. It will seem contradictory that the majority of these slaves were Christians or indoctrinated Christians, as they would have you believe, because it does not seem to match up very well with their desire to go against their very own indoctrinations. If indeed the slaves were so eager to gain their freedom, then the belief that their belief that they held was pro-slavery seems contradictory. Then why didn't they just throw away the entire religion altogether? After all, their subjugation, which they felt was unjust, and their Christian indoctrination are at odds with each other. There was the attempt by the slave owners, however, to take certain parts of the Bible to suit the agenda of owning black slaves, either by justifying the use of slaves and also by making the slaves themselves feel as if their current state was spiritually justified. So there was no lack of trying on the part of the slave owners. However, I do believe speculatively, though, that the reason for this was that some or many of the slaves had already acquired faith. So that was an attempt on the part of the slave owners to salvage a situation that could lead to rebellions. What they failed to realize is also that many of the abolitionists, such as John Brown, William Wilberforce, William Lloyd Garrison, were also Christians. They failed to realize that it was through their faith that they came to the conclusions of abolition. They also want to acknowledge, they don't want to acknowledge that anything including Christianity or Christian beliefs can be perverted for the evil benefits of whoever wants to. But these people want to make it seem as if the perversion itself represents the original stuff. This personally, clearly, to me, is the most comical and salient of them all. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, white people or Europeans themselves were the last race of people or region of people to have encountered Christianity, or at least Christianity as an established religion. One needs to understand that Christianity itself started in the Middle East with the ministry of Jesus. From there, his followers were persecuted and assassinated, often in very gruesome ways, starting with the Roman Empire, who fed them to lions, in arenas and stuff. This led them traveling very, very far and wide to preach the gospel. For example, like the doubting Thomas, one of the disciples of Jesus who doubted the crucifixion of Jesus. He went as far as India to preach, so that by 400 BC, there were Christians all throughout the Middle East, including Syria, Mecca, North Africa with the Berbers, Ethiopia, India. In fact, some of the oldest churches in the world are in Africa. The only difference between Europe and the other parts that I've mentioned is that with the advent of European conquest came the opportunity for European Christians to spread the gospel. Indeed, many missionaries were making trips on their own to Africa and other remote areas to preach. Colonization in the modern era made traveling easier. So the missionaries had it much easier, and therefore it gave them the ability to travel. And that brought about this European phase of Christianity. The irony is that African indigenous traditional religions, such as those practiced back on the continent and those practiced back in the day, they were actually more akin to the original European religions themselves, such as paganism and witchcraft, etc. So if you're looking for a white man's religion, as an African, you should look no further than the ones that were practiced by your ancestors. Europeans had gods such as Thor, the god of thunder, Pan, forest god, their Basque mythology, their Greek mythology, and all those mythologies are more closely akin to African spiritual beliefs and mythology than any Judeo-Christian beliefs.